Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all our colleagues joining this session. My name is Joerg Helmschrot. I'm the coordinator for the Expert Advisory Group, and we would like to use this session as part of what the Expert Advisory Group is going to do, and I will come back to this in one more second. While still waiting for people to joining, I would like to highlight that after also attending a number of excellent sessions the previous days, this session is a little bit different since we are not reporting back necessarily, but we are trying to use the session to interact with the GEO community, with you. And therefore, we have also kept a long slot for interaction with you. So this is a consultation with the GEO community rather than presenting a lot of success stories, but we want to hear your success stories, also your concerns. This is why we are here today. And this leads me straight into the aim of this session. When we go to the next slide. The Expert Advisory Group on GEOS, for those who are not familiar with it, was established resulting from the 2021 GEO Midterm Evaluation. And I will go a little bit back or come back to what actually is the role and the aim of the EAG and what are the deliverables we are expecting from it, also showing a little bit or giving more details on the timeline. So this session is a consultative session, as we said, and it supports the work of the EAG. So what we do today will be not only recorded, we will also share it with the with all EAG numbers to look into it. So we are looking into success stories from users, from providers contributing to the various GEOS components. But we also want to learn in with regard to what is the topic of this symposium, in particular, how such a global infrastructure, or a rather global infrastructure, is also supporting local, national, and regional solutions and decision-making. So by this, we also aim on discussing the potential limitations of global systems for such applications. And therefore, we have prepared, I think, a very exciting session. If we go to the next slide. Which I don't, it's coming now. So we have a very short welcome. I will give a little bit of background what the Expert Advisory Group is about. Then we have two presentations, which will be moderated by my colleague and one of our EAG members, Esther. So here we want to see as a pointer for also the discussion to some extent, we want to hear stories. We want to see how users and providers interact with GEOS platforms. Then, as a central part of this session, there will be a poll, which has two blocks. One will ask your input on and your thoughts about on the GEOS concept. And another block will look into GEOS infrastructure, the platforms, and I will guide you through this. So we have served some time for this, and we would like to present immediately the first results, but of course we will also continue analyzing it and also following up on what we've learned today. And based on these results and the presentations we've heard and the role of the EAG in this context, we will have a moderated discussion by Carrie, who is also an EAG member, where you are requested to share with us aspects I already mentioned. And finally, Greg, also EAG member, will summarize and close the session later. So this is what we have to expect for the next 90 minutes. There are a few housekeeping rules. I don't go too much into detail here, since most of you have visited or attended other sessions. Please change your name and put your institution or affiliation in front. Mute yourself, except you're speaking. use the chat for questions, comments. It will all be recorded, both the sessions as the chat, and also made available. And again, please be aware what is compiled through the poll will also serve the EAG and its work. And with this, I would like to go straight into what is the EAG? Why was it established? And some of you might be very familiar with it, but some of you might not have an idea. So therefore, I would like to say, give a little bit of background. The expert advisory group, again, was established on behalf of the GEO plenary through the GEO Executive Committee. And it is expected to review whether the concept of GEOS continues to be relevant to the GEO mission, all in the perspective of 2025 GEO, post-2025 GEO. And if it's still relevant, how the concept should be defined in the context of GEO's current understanding of its value proposition. And the second point would be to look into whether GEO should continue to serve as a provider of geospatial information and services infrastructure. And if so, what would be the main functions of such an infrastructure and what form should it take? So the EAG does not operate completely in a vacuum, but remains independent, but works with all the GEO structures, the governance structures, but also the work program, the foundational tasks, and so forth. So we are independent, but we will work and interact with all of you. Next slide, please. Who is the expert advisory group? We are 26 experts. They were nominated through either the Caucasus or the GEO Secretariat. They are spread all over the world. As you can see, we have a good balance in global coverage, which makes it a little bit tricky to meet, but we manage. And I think this is a phenomenon which we experience also in the work program as well, but it's exciting. But if we go to the next slide, you will also see that these experts have a very diverse, or this group has a very diverse background. So we have representatives looking at, coming from a national, international Earth observation strategy planning and implementation background, space technologies, data management and processing platforms, including big data and statistics, software development and platform development, including machine learning and artificial intelligence, national, international policy development experts, development aid experts. Of course, we have representatives from the academic and non-academic capacity development component, and as well civil society and citizen science. And I think this entrusts this expertise and enables the EAG to do the work it is expected to do. When we look at the next slide, you will see there are two main deliverables expected. And the first one will be an assessment, including recommendations of the overall relevance of the concept of GEOS in the context of the present day and future GEO. And the second one will be an assessment with recommendations of whether GEO should provide infrastructure support in service to its mission. And I think those are extremely fundamental questions when it comes to the orientation of GEO in the post-2025. Okay, what is our approach? And then I give you as a last slide also a timeline. So we will do a review of all the existing key documents, starting back when GEOS was conceptualized. Based on a decision of the expert advisory group, we have now set up two working groups. One look specifically in GEOS and system of systems concept. The other one looks specifically in the users and utilization of GEOS at the stage, since we have observed that it is very fundamental to answer the questions on the board. How is the existing infrastructure used and utilized? So there will be an assessment approach, and this session today is part of this assessment. So we want to interact and communicate with the community. And this is where the consultation part comes in. So we talk to the community today. And this will be an ongoing process. There will be more interactions with the community at several levels. We are in contact, of course, with the executive committee. We report progress to them, the work program and the program board, the foundational task. But we also want to seek consultation with regional and national GEOs and data and service providers and users. And I think this assessment will then consolidated and in different loops then also shared with the community. Unfortunately, and when we go to the next slide, we will see that we don't have a lot of time on it. So we want to provide a first response in June, in the middle or end of June. And of course, for the board meeting, the executive committee meeting in July. And again, there will be several iterations in terms of the in terms of the answers we are trying to find, and this will be also shared in these iterations. But we have to present it finally in October, our final report, which then will be presented and hopefully approved at the GEO week in end of October, early November. And I think with this last slide, I'm done. If there are questions regarding the work of the EAG, please put it in the chat, because in the interest of time, we would like to move forward. And therefore, I would like to hand over to Esther, who is also introducing you to the speakers of this session. Thank you very much. Esther, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joerg. Hello, everyone. Thank you again for joining us. During this block, we'll listen to presentations from persons who have interacted with the Global Earth Observation System of Systems, GEOSS, in which they will share their experiences, their success stories, impacts, and challenges. First off, we'll have Sergio Cinnirella, who's a senior lecturer at the CNR Institute of Atmospheric Pollution Research, and he'll be presenting on the potential and limitations on the use of the GEO platform, the GEOS4M Knowledge Hub point of view. Welcome, welcome, Sergio, over to you.
Thank you, Esther. So I do not present myself, so please, next slide. Thank you. I will give the framework of my evaluation on the GEO platform. So we work on to the GEOS4M flagship. The Global Observation System for Mercury is a GEO flagship that has main objectives to support UN global partnership on Mercury, because mercury pollution is a big concern around not all the world, but in few regions. The flagship is providing a global data set of monitoring data based on standard operating procedures, is providing a knowledge hub that integrates Earth observation data sets, modeling tools, and services, web services, because the main objective is to assess the effectiveness of measures undertaken by the Minamata Convention. Which are the key points of the GEOS4M knowledge hub that we are developing? The knowledge hub is really an integrated multimodal and multi-domain computational platform because it includes results of mathematical chemical models runs. It is based on a chemical transport model emulator that provide scenarios to end users. So it provides results on endpoints of mercury, let's say the amount of mercury in biota. All information, both data and services, are shared. And at the end, we provide a tool to analyze scenarios well suitable for policymaker, decision maker, or stakeholders in general. Next, please. Few words on the main components. We of course have a data catalog that provide links to the data sets. There is a number of metadata with URL inside. We have a GEO community portal under the GEO portal, and we are providing information to build the GEO Knowledge Hub. Next, please. Now, the main slide on which I will focus my presentation. We are on both sides, users and providers and users of the GEO platform. But when providing information, we point our attention on this key question. There is really an information redundancy. Why should be used the GEO platform if the source of data and also the metadata, of course, are elsewhere reported, elsewhere mapped? The GEO platform provides a very useful searching tool, but which is the added value? Only to provide information on maps, because from our point of view and in our community, when information is needed, is downloaded directly from the source. So researchers are not prone to use the portal, but they use directly the catalog. The GEO portal is suitable for different stakeholders? Actually, no, because in our case, we have different stakeholders ranging from the research community that needs data to run models, but afterward we provide model results through the portal on which applications are built. So the GEO portal and the Knowledge Hub are not really integrated. What we can provide as open knowledge is not mapped through the GEO portal, and vice versa. At the end, one key point that we tried to resolve through eShape project is the assessment of our metadata that follow the GEO data management principle. Until now, we do not have a tool to assess the compliance to the GEO data management principle, but eShape provided this very useful tool. So this is a first step, because we need also an independent audit to check the compliance of the metadata of the services, of course, compliance to the geo data management principle. I think this is my last slide. I'm open to question.
Thank you so much, Sergio. At the moment, there are no questions in the chat. Please, if you would like to ask any questions, put your questions in the chat or raise up your hand and we'll call on you to ask questions. But for now, I would move on to the next speaker and we can call it questions afterwards, if that's okay, Sergio. So next up, we have James Thornton. He's a coordinator with the Mountain Research Initiative, a GEO initiative seeking to increase the availability and accessibility of a wide range of data pertaining to mountainous regions to benefit the human societies and ecosystem. He will be presenting on the GEO-MOUNTAINS and GEOSS, status, rationale, and prospects. Hi, James, over to you.
Hi, Esther. Thank you very much indeed for the invitation to participate in this session. Indeed, I'm based at the Mountain Research Initiative in Switzerland, speaking today on behalf of GEO-MOUNTAINS, the global network for observations and information in mountain environments. In this presentation, I just wanted to give a few reflections on where we currently stand as a GEO initiative with respect to GEOSS and how we see some prospects for the future integration with the platform. Next slide, please. So our objectives, as you've mentioned, are really to increase the discoverability, accessibility, and usability of mountainous data pertaining to many different disciplines on a global basis, and then to apply these data both for scientific applications, but also to have policy impacts. Of course, we rely really on a very large network of contributors, both individuals and institutions, to help us achieve this, as well as financial support. So for instance, over the past couple of years, the initiative's activities have really picked up thanks to some funding from the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, which we gratefully acknowledge. On to the next slide, please. Okay, so a large part of our work is concerned with in situ data. In situ data are really crucial in mountains. Many of the gridded data sets which we may be familiar with from remote sensing or model outputs can be too coarse in areas of very complex terrain. And in addition, there are several important variables which we can't simply derive at the moment using remote technologies. We have to actually measure them in situ. However, the GEOSS portal currently has fairly limited capacities with respect to displaying in situ or point monitoring infrastructure and the associated data sets. And so to overcome this, we've actually developed our own independent solution, and this inventory and web mapping tool is now available via the GEO-MOUNTAINS website. This is our in situ inventory of observational infrastructure. If you could go to the next slide, please. And essentially, this is a web mapping application, as I've mentioned, which provides the locations of many mountainous observation sites, and users can click on a given one. We can also see the extent of the mountainous terrain and essentially get some metadata about the site, and also click through to actually download the corresponding data set. And so I won't dwell too much on this. There's various other functionality as well, for instance, being able to search for sites, download the entire database, and so forth. But really, this is just a very basic idea. I've shown this in previous GEO events, so I won't go into too much detail now, but this is what we've done on in situ data specifically. If you could go to the next slide, please. With respect to the more traditional, or in terms of the context of GEO, perhaps the more traditional common data sets are our gridded data sets. Again, here we've actually developed an independent solution, which at the moment is rather simple. And this again is served via our website. And it's just a simple table which provides some metadata and again links to download the various data sets. And users can filter, for instance, on discipline, on region. So very standard functionality. There's also search functionality. And as we see here, we can click through and actually download the associated data. Again, really trying to increase the ease with which researchers and others can access data sets which may be of interest to them. On to the next slide, please. Okay, so given that actually, particularly for this second case, most of this functionality would also have been possible to achieve or to replicate in GEOSS, the question is, why didn't we? It's quite simple in the in situ case, but in this case, why did we decide to go down our own path in some ways? Firstly, it's to sort of tame a little bit the ocean of data. Certainly, we feel that GEOSS can, in some cases, be quite overwhelming, and our community of mountain data users and others would really appreciate a more constrained list or set of data sets to consider. And again, also to ensure a certain degree of flexibility or control over the requirements so that we can meet the needs of our community. So this could be, for instance, the ability to sort on certain columns, such as spatial resolution of data sets, measurement frequency, is it monthly, daily, hourly, these sorts of aspects, which at the moment I don't think GEOSS necessarily offers. However, having said that, it should really be possible to largely mirror this simple data list in GEOSS, and we certainly hope to do this in future, in particular via the GEO-MOUNTAINS GEOSS community portal. If you could go to the next slide, please. So this already exists, this site, within the GEOSS infrastructure, and we also actually have preloaded the delineations of mountain ranges globally. With a slightly old data set, this can be updated shortly, hopefully. But it's really important as we hopefully then populate this portal. It's important that we have those mountain delineations on there so that people can see the extent of a given data set with respect to the extent of mountainous terrain. If you could just go on to the next slide again, please. And also just to mention briefly that there are already some data sets which are associated with GEO-MOUNTAINS in the system. So for instance, some of these terrestrial ecosystem maps, which are the outputs of a joint project which we were running, which is sort of just in the final stages now between Joerg Research in Italy, the USGS, and us at GEO-MOUNTAINS. On to the next slide, please. The third way in which we've been engaging with the GEOSS portal is via the GEO Knowledge Hub. We're very strongly supportive of this concept, and we have already contributed knowledge resources to the GEO Knowledge Hub, and we're also encouraging our community to contribute more. So this is another area in which we're engaged. On to the final slide, please. So in terms of drawing some summary and perspectives, in our view, GEOSS should certainly continue to provide some core functionality that every work program activity can benefit from. So there's certainly functionality which is useful in many different cases. However, a certain degree of flexibility or ability to extend this core functionality may be required so that GEOSS can best serve the slightly distinct or particular needs of various sub-communities. And of course, there may need to be sufficient technical support to enable these adjustments to be made. So in our case, in particular, via this community portal, we would maybe require better support for in situ data, and maybe also the ability to actually preload some of these mountain delineations beforehand to ensure that GEOSS is really suitable for our group of stakeholders. It's great to see that the integration with the GEO Knowledge Hub is already in the plan, because in theory, the data aspect of a GEO Knowledge package could actually be hosted on GEOSS, and it wouldn't be necessary to also load the data onto the GEO Knowledge Hub itself. There could be obviously the cross link made there. But in general, we look forward to helping where possible to further develop the capacity of GEOSS, the new version, and ensure that there are a wide range of mountain resources, both data and information, in this system to serve our community of researchers, practitioners, and policymakers. So thank you very much.
Thank you, James. Thank you both again. Thank you, Sergio, as well. Are there any questions from anyone before we go on to the next session? From the audience, does anybody want to speak? Any questions in the chat? Okay, so someone's posted something. Joost van Bemmelen from the ESA is saying that he'll be very interested in knowing more about the limitations that you believe the GEOS portal has. As far as he knows, being responsible for the GEOS portals, there are no real limitations of the portal in terms of what it can visualize. The limitations are normally caused by accessibility of the data. He would like to note that the recently started GPP project will further evolve the portal and is willing to consider new requirements. So I think James and Sergio, the major question here is, what exact limitations do you perceive the portal has? So in terms of visualization or accessibility, what would you pointedly say that the limitations are on the platform?
Just a very minor limitation, just from our experience, was just to do with file sizes of a particular layer being pre-rendered. So as I mentioned, we wanted in our community portal to actually display, on the landing page, so to speak, these mountain delineations, and several of the files were a little bit larger and couldn't actually be displayed. This was a couple of years ago now, so that was something which maybe slightly put us off, but it's a very minor and no doubt something which can be fixed on a technical basis. But in general, I would agree that that really ensuring that the links to various data sets are live and things. This is, I think, the accessibility is really the major limitation. I was just exploring a little bit the portal in the last couple of days, and clicking on a few of the data sets, and the links are broken and things like this. So that's obviously a challenge to ensure that that everything is kept up to date and things. I'm sure there are, again, technical solutions for this. So we don't have major major criticisms or major limitations, just a couple of small things. And it's really about this flexibility, I think, to enable the various GEO activities to tailor certain aspects or certain of the search fields to their particular needs, because of course there's a great diversity of work going on in GEO, and every community has slightly different expectations and requirements. And this also comes in our feedback and in our engagement with our participants. So there's obviously a balance there to be had between the core functionality and how much flexibility or freedom is offered, and how this can actually be achieved.
Thank you, James.
Yeah.
How about you, Sergio?
Yeah, from my perspective, I am data provider. So what I can see behind my data is that there is a community asking to understand how is going the data somewhere. So how is the concentration of mercury in atmosphere somewhere out there. So one main limitation is that the portal can give you the URL, and so can give you the address of the data, but cannot give you much information on how is going the data. I understand that, well, this depends also on how much the data is provided, how much the data is arranged, managed, and so on. One other point is that actually we do not know which is the robustness of the data. So we trust the provider, because are researchers, are well accepted scientists. But when you interact with the policymaker, the first question they pose to you is how much is this data? How is the uncertainty of the data you are providing? So one thing that can be included in the GEO portal is the I don't know if self-assessment of the uncertainty, or something that can be done a posteriori, let's say. But one thing is that uncertainty should be provided with the data.
Thank you so much, Sergio. There's another question, but I'm certain it's not for you. It says, what's the planned evolution of the GEOS platform? So like Joerg mentioned earlier, that's what the EAG has been tasked with, to decide where does GEOS go from here, and what activities do we want to propose to evolve it. So I'm sure there will be a number of questions in the poll, which would seek your support as well to help us find the answer to that. So without any other questions, I'll hand over back to you, Joerg. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Esther, and thank you to the speakers for two very good pointer presentations. I think they are very complementary to what we've heard the previous days and today. And it also brings me to the point to understand that most presenters and most in the audience are aware of the GEOS concept, but in particular the GEOS infrastructure with all its components. And I think to make this difference a little bit clear, we have prepared a poll, and here it's important for us also to understand and help to resolve the confusion about the terminology, but also your understanding of the different components. And as I introduced in the beginning, we have two blocks in this poll. One is looking into and maybe we can go to the next slide. You see already the question here also to get prepared, since we want to go through it in not too long time. But the first block looks into the GEOS concept, and we would like to understand your understanding of these aspects. And therefore, I would like to ask my colleagues from the GEO Secretariat to start with the poll. And you can see there is partially the possibility to give 3 answers, and to some extent there is given answers where you can choose from. And we would like to ask you to go through this poll and help us as the EAG to better understand your perspective of the GEOS concept. And we see already that the numbers coming in. I would like to take the moment also to say that we have now 104 participants, which gives us great confidence in also better understanding from the GEO community, their understanding or your understanding of the GEOS concept. And then in the next block, we will look more specifically into the infrastructure. So while also giving you the opportunity to go into this poll, in the back, we will also start with presenting you the first results. And we are really excited to see how these answers look like and how they motivate the discussion, the follow-up discussion. While also waiting, I would also invite you just to get back to us if the space is limited here and you would like to share more of your thoughts for the entire poll. Please get back to the EAG, either directly or through the GEO Secretariat. Okay, I see a question from Thierry in support of the poll. Which asks for more specification on question 3. I think it speaks to number 2. What is from your experience in your work environment? Is the concept of GEOS as a global system of systems still relevant to the work of GEO with all its work activities and the work program activities? Also activities around the regional GEOs, yes or no? And if you say yes or no, why is it? Or why is it not relevant? Wenbo, do you have an overview? I see that there is also Jana who wants to come in. Jana, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Joerg. So quick comment I'd like to make, and I just put it actually in the chat. And that is, I think there was no real presentation or moment kind of to reflect on this, but I think as this is an important exercise, an important poll. And so care must be really taken to understand that we are not, to make sure we're not referring to GEOS and GEOS portal interchangeably. Because the two presentations that came before this poll were saying GEOS, but we're really talking about the portal. So the portal could very well be called GEO portal, as in the piece of infrastructure that is provided by GEO common infrastructure. So will it change anything with respect to the capability, the functionality, if we call it GEO portal? Probably not. But the cause of the sort of where this recommendation from the midterm evaluation stems was in the concept of GEOS itself. And the fact that the previous speakers spoke of the platform but called it GEOS is emblematic of the very challenge that the midterm evaluation highlighted. So that's why I wanted to make it absolutely clear that in this poll, the question is asking not about the portal. Is portal important? Should the portal stay? But is this concept of GEOS clearly understood? Is it still defining who we are, what our identity is? Can we continue forward without saying GEOS, but say GEO portal, GEO knowledge hub, GEO flagships, GEO initiatives? Thanks.
Thank you very much. I think this is a very important intervention, also in respect to the presentation, and most of the presentations we've heard in the last 2 days. And I think the poll also should bring this out, that there is confusion and this interchangeable use of the terms without going back to the origins of where the GEOS concept is coming from. But I think the second block will speak then to the infrastructure itself, which includes the GEO portal, but also others, which were mentioned before. Wenbo, can you please
yes.
Can let me know where we are with the poll?
We have 18 responses so far, but I think participants don't necessarily just stick to the first 5 questions. I think most of them complete all questions. So probably you can go to actually the second slide of the questions to introduce.
Okay,
them.
thank you very much. Then we should do so. I think most of these are very straightforward questions. It might not take too much time. First of all, we would like to know in what sector you work, and there are examples given which you can present. Then what infrastructure you have used, and here you will find the GEO portal, but also the knowledge hub, the GEO netcast and others. Then we would like to know if you consider yourself rather a GEO service user or data or knowledge provider. And what we have observed, most colleagues we are interacting with are, I hear when one of the colleagues does not see the poll. is it started? Is it active?
Given there are over 20 responses, it has been started. Please look at the panel at the bottom of your screen, and there's a poll quiz button. And if you don't see it, probably your Zoom is not up to date.
Okay.
When we do, as participants, we don't have the polls tab below in the Zoom.
Oh, excuse me, what is your question?
Sorry, no, this is Florian. I was just saying that we don't have a polls button on the bottom of the screen as participants, so we cannot see it.
But how do the poll display?
It pops up as a window usually.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Florian, for the correction.
Then my suggestion would be that we just continue with those colleagues who are able to fill in the poll. And then we also provide this alternative option. But while doing so, we might, if you can do so, maybe give a first hint on answers, and then we go straight to the discussion, for which Carrie also prepared a few comments and questions. Menbo, are you able to close?
Yes. Yeah, we have 26 responses so far. I can close the poll for the moment, and we are able to relaunch the poll if necessary. And for those who haven't been able to do that, we can do that afterwards.
Please do so.
So from my side, I have shared the results. Can you see the result?
Yes, I see this little window popping up, and it tells me that 97% have answered the first question without seeing the answers.
Okay.
For the second question, is the GEOS concept still relevant to GEO? There is 66% saying yes and 34% saying no as an answer, which gives already some sort of an idea. Also 86% of the poll answers, oh, thank you for showing this. Now we see it all. So we get already an indication and also the single answers here. Without going into detail here, we have to look into this in more detail, also getting the second part of the poll for those who had no access at this moment. But we can say we have at least a third of the participants who were able to answer these questions and also provided short answers to the potential and the limitations. And then for the second block, which starts with question 6, we have also 29. I'm not sure why it is restricted to 29, but I think our experts will find out. So we know where the participants or the respondents are coming from, what infrastructure was used. 62% out of the 29 have used the infrastructure and provided an answer here. And I see that most use the Geo Knowledge Hub and the GEOS platform, of course. Okay, then there were also others provided. And we have also an answer if colleagues see themselves as data provider or users. And there is no answer as a user, if I see it correctly here. And then the number 10 is a very interesting response when it's asking, is the current GEOS infrastructure and suite of tools sufficient and fit for purpose? And there's a high majority out of the 29 respondents 16 respondents, there's 88% saying no. So this is very interesting, and we have to look into the answers why or why not. And then the last questions looking into questions of if there is more user engagement needed to also utilize the GEOS infrastructure and tools more. There's also a clear response here at this stage. We have to take this very carefully since we have not the full picture from all the participants. And I think when we will also look into this. I also see Justina's hand, but Justina, if you allow me, maybe you also just to move over into the discussion, since I think there will be more questions coming up. So I would like to give the hand and the floor to Carrie and go with us through the next points, particularly the discussion points, since we are already a little bit late in time. Thank you very much, Carrie. The first hand was Justina. Thank you.
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Carrie Stokes, and I will be moderating this next session as part of our overarching session about GEOSS. So coming out of the poll and the previous presentation that you have seen about what the purpose of our expert advisory group, known as the EAG, what we are here to do, we really value your thoughts, and the poll was a way to get started, to get some feedback from you. And this session now is to have an opportunity to have a dialogue in more real time where you have an opportunity to speak. I would like to ask you to raise your hand if you would like to answer some of the questions that I will be posing to help facilitate this conversation. So it is fine if in this conversation you find yourself repeating some of the thoughts you may have already had when we went through the poll itself. But this is an opportunity for us to spend about 20-25 minutes together on this discussion about what the GEOSS as a concept means in terms of the terminology itself, and also what types of IT services the GEO is best positioned to provide if we as a group determine that we do need to continue to provide IT services. And we have seen some good presentations already to date since the symposium has begun, as well as today and in this session so far. So what I would like to ask you to do, and first off, I would like to ask for your participation and for your thoughts. I'd like to start by asking a few questions, and I'll ask one at a time to get your thoughts. You may either raise your hand to speak, and if you do speak, I would like to make sure you unmute yourself first. And also, if your internet connection allows, please allow us to see you as well to show us on the video. If that is not working well for you, we also encourage you to use the chat. Just know that I will try to divide my attention between both hearing your questions or answers to questions, as well as trying to monitor your thoughts in the chat box. So let's see, to start, there was a clarification that Jana gave us between the concept of GEOSS and also the GEO platform. And it turns out that there is confusion among many about these terms. And one of the things we really want to do is just get clarity, even amongst our own selves, so that we're all working from the same page, as we say. So my first question is, do you understand the difference between the term GEOSS and GEO? GEOSS is, of course, the Global Earth Observation System of Systems. And GEO stands for the Group on Earth Observations. But when these terms were first developed many years ago, when we got started, things have evolved over time, and we've come to realize that there is confusion. So I would like to ask have a show of hands or in the chat, if you understand what the GEOSS concept means. And one of the main questions that we as an expert advisory group are trying to answer is, do we need to keep using the term GEOSS? Because it turns out it's become a bit of a confusion. It doesn't mean if we drop the term GEOSS as a community that we're dropping any of the other services. It doesn't automatically mean we're going to drop services. It's, do we need to just shift our terminology to use GEO platform, GEO Netcast, GEO Knowledge Hub could still remain. It's just the question about the terminology first. And I do see a hand, and it is coming from Justina. So please, Justina, please feel free to answer.
Thank you, Carrie, and thank you for providing that discussion and that clarification. I think just coming from the perspective of the MTE, that was sort of a seminal question for, apologies for my voice here, for the entire, for a big part of the evaluation, because the question really was, what was defined as GEOS back in 2005, based on technology shifts within GEO, no longer seemed viable in terms of even attaining that or being able to move forward. And I'm afraid much of the earlier discussion focused a lot on the GEO portal, as Diana indicated. And I think there is confusion that when we talk about GEOS, do we mean the actual platform, or do we mean the entire function of the whole cohesive GEO and its current role, its convening function, its service to users, its ability to provide the kind of open knowledge and tools that we're talking about. And so I think before we ask the question of, do you think we should retain GEOS, we should first define what we mean by that definition, because otherwise I'm afraid those answers may not reflect the full scope of what we're trying to attain. So just based on that experience, I would definitely encourage the EAG to perhaps have more focused discussions on this very concept. I think that is the pivotal question for GEO moving forward. And I know it's a tricky one, and there's all kinds of, GEO portal now, GEO Knowledge Hub, GEOS, what does that mean? And it's a tricky one. But that said, I think we need to start here and really focus on that clear value added of what does GEO mean, what does it bring to the table, and what can GEO sustain in the most effective and impactful manner moving forward. So thank you for that time.
Yes, thank you, Justina. I really appreciate that. Jana, I think it would be important at this point if you could provide a clarifying definition as you understand it before we continue with the rest of this discussion. Justina made a very good point that it's important that we all are understanding the actual definition. And I know you just gave a clarification, but I think it's important. Maybe not everybody heard it because they were filling out the poll.
Yikes. Okay, I'll try this again without being extremely provocative, but see, I think maybe just coming from the place of where we are when we move forward, one of the things that we find very challenging, and the midterm evaluation has it all over its findings, is that we need to clearly define our value proposition and be clearly communicating to us on the inside, to the external world, who we are, what we do. So in that sense, the simplicity of the message is what we really want, right? So we need to be able to drop anything that we've found is pulling us backwards. And so I might disagree a little bit with Justina in terms of we have to first define this, because that exercise in itself is going to take us into 2032. Because the thing with GEOS is GEOSS, guys, I'm not talking about platform, portal, knowledge hub. I'm not talking about those IT services. I'm talking about GEOSS. We have a text that describes it, but we can't point to something. We can't show it tangibly to say this is what it is. Some people think they understand it. Others have no clue. And then the third group of people never even heard of it, but they've been engaging with GEO just on the basis of GEO's representation as a convening group, as a group that connects science to policy, as the group that develops open knowledge. So I really would posit to you that it is not really something we need to drag on for a very long time, but rather to ask, if we don't say GEOSS, what do we lose? Because we do not lose the convening of GEO. We do not lose the brand of the platform, of the knowledge hub, of the portal. Can we just call them GEO platform? In fact, as a lot of people do. But give us that space where we don't have to engage in these debates about what system of system is. Does it exist? Have we reached it? Will we ever reach it? How far away are we from reaching that system of systems? It's this, from where we sit, it's this elusive concept that just generates a lot of confusing sort of discussions, which could be fun over beer. But when you're trying to communicate as an organization and put the messaging out, it's quite problematic. So I think I've probably provoked enough, so I'm going to stop here.
Thank you, Jana. I think this is the very place we need to be provoking and provocative, to use your word, because this is a real opportunity for us to get clearer with ourselves about our purpose and the incredible value that we bring to the Earth observation community and beyond. And also how we communicate externally, who we are, what we do. And one thing we have learned in this world of social media that did not exist when GEOSS and GEO got its start is that the incredible pull on people's attention every second for reading information, for looking at messages coming in, text, social media messages, emails, phone calls, whatever it may be. And so the more refined and clearer we can be in describing who we are and what we do and the incredible value we bring to society at large is a good thing for us. And I think will also, it just will make us even better at what we do. So that's my thought. I will stop interjecting my own thoughts and I will get back to facilitating this discussion. I see that Katie Matthews has a hand up, and Katie, I would like to give you the opportunity to speak.
Hi, I'm Katie Matthews. I'm relatively new to the GEO community. I'm in the United States and I work for NOAA. I remember this debate back actually when GEO was first formed. So I feel like this is continuing to be going on for a long time. In addition to international affairs, I have a communications background. And so kind of taking a different tact and kind of following, Carrie, what you were just talking about. I agree 100% with Justina that we need to continue to work on defining the value proposition for how we move forward and use that as a communications tool. But I also 100% agree with you, Carrie, about the simplification of how we talk about ourselves is going to make it easier when we have a good defined value proposition, when we're trying to engage new communities. Having one term that we use is going to be very helpful. And so strictly looking at this from a communications perspective, I'm very interested in how do we simplify the nomenclature that we're using, regardless of the application work and the value proposition work that needs to continue to go on behind the scenes. But to the general public and to the users we're trying to meet, they don't need to be involved in that part. They just need to, we need to be very clear in terms of how we are communicating. Thanks. And I look forward to meeting more people in the future.
Thank you, Katie. Really appreciate your observations and sharing that. I'm also monitoring the chat to see if there are any other discussions here, if there are any other hands that want to be raised to share your thoughts. Okay, now there's a great long chat I need to review while also facilitating this. My question then for you all, and I'm going to take the lead of Jana and be a little provocative. Is there anybody opposed who's part of this conversation to deliberately shifting to using the term geo platform, geo knowledge hub, and deliberately stop using the term GEOSS? I'd like to get a sense of that. If you really want to keep GEOSS, could you please let us know now? Because I think it's clear we need to be clear about who we are and how we describe our work. This decision alone does not determine the second primary question that the expert advisory group will need to explore. But the first one about our terminology seems quite easy to make a decision about, because it doesn't mean we would change doing any of the IT investments and services that currently exist. But the first question is, can we be decisive to at least determine whether or not to drop the GEOSS terminology moving forward? Who would like to raise a hand? It looks like we have somebody, they're writing a position paper on this. All right, I'll ask another question, see if I can get a hand to be raised. If you prefer, if you believe that there's value in keeping the term GEOSS, can you share with us the value of the GEOSS term? Is there anybody who's willing to raise a hand? I'm also trying to read the comments coming in at the same time. All right, I'm seeing people say that we need to find agreement. Yeah. Yes, I'm seeing another comment about our discussion is not just about the terminology. We have two components to our work. We hoped that the terminology piece could become an easy enough one to determine, but the more substantive part of this is, and if we continue with our IT services, how might we improve them? How might we how do we determine what makes the most sense for us to invest in? We are in a very different world in terms of digital technologies today as compared to the year 2005, when the original concepts of GEOSS and GEO were put forward. So that's a larger discussion that we're investigating with the EAG, and as an opportunity to get your feedback. The poll was established, and now this opportunity to have a discussion. So we really welcome your comments, trying to read the chats at the same time. Please feel free to raise your hand if you want to contribute to this. There's no wrong or right answer in this. These are just feedback that we're trying to get and lead the discussion forward. Okay, maybe that some people don't all have access to hand raising functionality in their Zoom, but I do see that Joerg has his hand raised. So please go ahead and share your thoughts on this while I continue to read the chat.
Thank you, thank you. I just want to mention two things. The first one, I was informed that the poll is now prepared and it will be shared through the chat, I assume, so that everyone has the chance to take part of it. And coming back to the discussion, this morning we had a working group meeting with the leads, looking into GEOS as a concept and the relevance of system of systems at a global scale. And maybe also to be a bit provocative, we discussed how can you bridge, and this speaks also to the symposium here, how can it be bridged that you have at a very global level data providers and how do they meet the users at a local level? This might be a very important question. What should be addressed? And I think also just to come back a little bit to the conference here or the symposium, I also would like to share that we discussed terminology, and this will be a very critical point also in the work of the EAG, as Carrie has already stated, and we are currently also just collecting the information, how it evolved over time to allow for a better understanding why this confusion came in and what would be our recommendation to deal with it. And again, this interaction shows already that there's a strong interest in the community to be part of this discussion, and we will take this up and share this with the dedicated team in the EAG looking into this. Carrie, that was what I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you. So I would like to continue to share your thoughts, continue to share in the chat as well as with your hand raising if you're able to do so and speak. The next question I would like, and I understand we haven't quite resolved, do we continue with the GEOSS terminology or do we not? But clearly that's something we've got to get resolved. The next question I would like to ask for those of you who are online is, what are, with your understanding of GEOSS, what do you believe is the current value of GEOSS? And if you have a value because you've used it, could you share with us how you use it? Do we have anybody who can share beyond the two presentations we've just seen? So I'll repeat that question again. Can you speak to the current value of GEOSS as you understand it, and its value and how you currently use it? Yes, Justina. Over to you.
Thanks, Carrie. So I may just look at it indirectly, but perhaps we could answer my understanding of, and hence the confusion, I think, between everyone looking at GEO and GEOSS as it was originally defined, which sort of at the time such a defined as a core construct of GEO. But looking at it now, I would say perhaps we should think about what is, or ask, what is the key value added of GEO? Whether that you define it in terms of data portals, in terms of data infrastructure provided, or in terms of a networking function, convening function, can you define perhaps the key value added of GEO? And maybe with that, we see a picture of what that means. So maybe just a clarification that would help others to push the discussion forward, but just a suggestion. Thank you.
Well, I like that question because maybe we can get some answers from people. Jana, I see your hand. Over to you.
Yeah, maybe this is just like while people are thinking, this is quite amusing. And, you know, I'm reading the comments and it's fantastic. Everybody gets it. GEO is the people. There's absolutely no confusion. Everyone says GEO is the people. And then when trying to say what GEOSS is, I read a kind of a technical term, or it's a concept. You know, it immediately goes into like this, a bit of an esoteric sort of space. Like, well, it's kind of a term, but what does it denote, you guys? Because if we're talking about the portal, the platform, the knowledge hub, well, we call it the infrastructure, the GEO infrastructure, right? We could easily say the GEO infrastructure. So if we take that out, what is that otherwise? Well, it's kind of a concept, or as somebody else said, it's all of the technology pieces. Which technology pieces? Are we talking about the Google Earth Engine and the AWS and the Microsoft Planetary Computer and the regional platforms and the, is all of that? Are we claiming that all of that is what we created because we pursued system of systems? Over and out for now.
All right. Thank you, Jana, for further insight from your perspective. I think I'm going to take the advice that Justina just gave, and rather than asking you about the current value of GEOSS, given our little confusion about what that means, because it means something different to everybody, I'd like to make the question, what do you see is the value of GEO? And to clarify again, GEO is group on Earth observations, which denotes the people. And GEOSS refers to the system of systems. So in many people's minds, that meant the technology, whatever the IT technology services were. So I see, Paola, you've got your hand up, please.
Thank you, Carrie. I would like to bring to the conversation an example that is, I think it's a very interesting example. Like a couple of months ago, the data working group has been contacted by the UN Agency for Atomic Energy. And this agency has a specific project, which is marine radioactivity data, in situ data. And they contacted us to get guidance on data sharing, how better to implement open data, how better to implement data management principles. That's very recently the data working group presented and was approved by program board, not the GEOS data management principle, but the GEO data management principles. And so IAEA, which is International Agency for Atomic Energy, has been provided guidance over a number of technical questions. And one of their main concern and willingness to advance was to be interoperable with GEOS, because they wanted to make sure that their in situ data was discoverable, accessible, and reused by the GEO community in the overall variety of GeoWork program activities. And so here I really think it's a nice example. They're not yet a participating organizations. They will become participating organizations. And so here we have really the overall path, the willingness to make sure that their marine radioactivity data sets are brought to a larger audience. So if probably this example could concretize the concept of system of systems, and making sure that through guidelines and open data and data management principle guidelines and through interoperability steps could be made available through the GEOS platform in the hands of additional users. So I stop here. I'm not going to go any further. It's it's a concrete example that the data working group has gone through. And I think is a nice example to be brought to the discussion. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for sharing your thoughts. Any additional thoughts on, I'm rephrasing the question slightly about the value of GEO. We've just heard some examples here, and I don't know if anyone has ever really doubted the value of GEO per se, but in terms of the IT services that are offered, we have Greg, please, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Carrie. Well, I'm gonna be quick, but I think we should keep in mind one thing that is extremely important, and maybe from my point of view, it's gonna be probably the best added value so far from GEO and even the services and the IT services that is providing. It provides a kind of, let's say, neutral and inclusive space for I would say both data providers and data users of whatever type of Earth observations. And I think that's something that is extremely important. I wouldn't say that we are against some key actors in the field, but at least we need to have this neutral and inclusive space. And I think that's one of the biggest added value I see in GEO and GEOSS, and being both a data provider through the services we're providing across the different projects we were involved in, and the data users also trying also to teach to my students using the GEOSS platform itself. I think there are still a lot of things to do, but I think we're going somehow in the right direction, and there are clearly rooms to evolve both GEO, so the people, and GEOSS. But yeah, keep in mind neutral and inclusive. I think that's important.
Yes, very good points to make. Neutral and inclusive, I think, is certainly our objective, regardless of the terminology. So thank you. We have another hand up. Looks like Bente.
Hello, nice to see you. Yeah, a quick comment on the value of GEOSS. From the very beginning, I think GEOSS is a tool for GEO to be able to better coordinate and evaluate gaps globally, and to avoid duplication if it's not necessary. So if you have this federated system of systems, you will be able, it's one of the ways that you will be able to evaluate that. So it's a tool for GEO. And the other, and then you have the work program, and the work program is where we are having practical implementations of use of Earth observations, also to discover gaps and best practices, etc. So it could be said very simple, you know, what's the value of GEOSS for GEO? It's to be able to do the GEO's task objectives better. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that very simple explanation, really appreciate it. Ricardo, I see your hand up.
Hi, Carrie. Okay, I got my camera on. Hi, how you doing? Long time to see. Nice to see you again. Greetings to Jana. Yeah, my comment is this. I've been working with GEO for many years now. As you know, I started in Colombia. I'm always trying to link the people, the end users, with the GEOS portal. Because I think it's a browser, you have many tools, community websites, but at the practical way, we didn't find system of systems. It's this collection of the many things, but it's not expressing exactly system of systems, because you can see, if the system of systems, you can see the tool integrating all systems, for example, regional platforms. My conclusion was at that time when we were trying to use the GEOS platform, the GEOS, we have to go to the regional platforms, because it's more clear for us. The people can understand an easier way where the data is, on understanding the tools in separate way. It's not expressing system of systems. That's why I think it's not the right word, but it's pretty valuable, because when you see GEO and GEOS, people say something is happening, but in the real use, we didn't find a system of systems. I think we have to maybe segregate the concept or use another concept, because I think it's very ambitious, say the system of systems, because in the practical way, we didn't find that concept. That's my comment. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you, Ricardo. It's really, these are the kinds of inputs we're looking for to better understand. And just to reply to one of the comments in the chat, this discussion about the terminology is not meant in any way to be a distraction from the additional discussions about what is realistic and in our best interest, and our manageable influence to continue with in terms of our investments with the IT services. So don't confuse the two on that. And if I have confused you, I'm very sorry. That was not my intention. But this is a chance to get the terminology and a sense from people about how they've used GEOSS and GEO services. So I've got one last question, and we probably will only have time for one comment because we are coming close to time. If you have a limitation that you feel exists right now with regard to GEOSS or GEO services, could you share that? This is important for us to understand as we think about how to position ourselves moving forward into this very fast-paced technology and digitally driven world in which we operate. I don't yet see any hands, but I see messages coming into the chat. Okay. Let's see, I do see a hand, it looks like from Stefan.
Yeah, hello everybody. Thank you. First, I have a little, my son is here with me, so I have a little bit childcare. But in particular to that meeting, in combination to that meeting here. Sorry for that. But one thing for limitations. I come from an UNESCO center. We are working in the water sector, in hydrology sector, quite ambitious also with WMO and UNEP and other UN organizations. And what I observed in the last 5 years, I would say, were always a kind of double efforts from GEO communities and on UN level. And I think that is always a thing of cross-checking what is doing the other parties and where are really the gaps which could be addressed by GEOS and GEO and the GEO groups. Of course, this is a matter of communication and of exchange of information. And I think this is really an important step and to really avoid this double efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. Is there any last comment that anybody who is tuned in would like to make with regard to the value of GEOSS, the limitations, the potential, before I end the discussion and hand it back over to Joerg?
Oh, thank you very much. I was just reading the chat. There's always comments coming in. It's very interesting. Usually you sit in meetings when people want to speak rather than to type. We have it differently, but we capture everything. That's very important. And I very much like the discussion because of it also guides us on what aspects we have to look in more detail. And again, everything will be mirrored to the entire group of experts looking into these aspects. I think the discussion could go on quite for some time on the terminology, but also the individual aspects of IT developments and time gaps, and also the linkage, which I missed still in this discussion, how GEOS components or platforms really solve problems on the ground. We have seen a few examples, but it's usually driven through the GEO community. It does not come from the end user side. And I think this is a very important aspect. When it comes to terminology, I would say, and I think Ricardo made a statement, when we talk about systems of systems, it's just a term. Systems in system theory are clearly defined, and I'm not sure this was a tendency in the 90s and the early 2000s to look into this if we are still up to date with this. But I think the EAG will look into this. I myself enjoyed the discussion very much, and I would like to give one of our EAG members, Greg, the floor to summarize, to wrap up, and also wish everyone a good day. So Greg, it's up to you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Joerg. Well, first of all, I would like to thank all the audience and all the participants for their very valuable inputs and the vibrant discussions I've seen also both in the chat or live. I think that shows the interest both for GEO as the institution and the community and GEOS as the tools provided by the GEOS platform and the various component of the platform. But I would say that I've tried to capture and I took some notes and some keywords. But that I think besides the clear efforts of communications and simplifications here in terms of terminology and things like this, I would say that I will if I try to summarize, I think that the global concept behind the infrastructure and the system of systems, it's still good and relevant, and there are clear messages for more user engagement. And I do remember that we used to have these data provider and users workshops that were really successful, bringing together all the people interested in building applications and tools that might have an impact on the ground, as you said, Joerg. So I think it's going to be extremely relevant maybe to revamp this kind of workshops. But there is also a clear need to make, I would say, the tools or the IT tools more tailored to the user needs. So I think that these are the two clear messages that we need to consider. And in that regards, I think also keeping in mind that in building and trying to build user communities around GEO and GEOS, I think we should consider trying to target the different agencies that have reporting mandates and trying to definitely tackle this issue of supporting the reporting mandates of organizations such as the Minamata Convention, or if we think to the UNCCD with the Land Degradation Neutrality Initiative and things like this. So then we can make also the message out of what we are collectively doing more clear. There are also interesting comments, I think, about the possibilities of integrating both, I would say, the GEOS platform as a data discovery and accessibility tool together with the emerging GEO Knowledge Hub. So I think that's something we need also to keep in mind and to consider for the future. Obviously, the added value of everything we are doing is extremely important. In situ data, integrating in situ data is something that is key. The flexibility and extensibility, I think that's something I already a little bit touched. And I think in terms of scale, somebody also bring the message that we need to tackle maybe not the global dimension at the beginning, but more the regional and the national scale, but the regional scale, because they are sharing maybe more common issues. I would say that might be a scale where we need to act in more details. And and that's it. And I just want to finish maybe to also just to raise awareness, because the European Commission is financing also various projects related to GEO and GEOSS. And at the beginning of this year, there was the launch of this GEOSS Platform Plus project that is exactly aiming to evolve the GEOSS platform and the different components of the platform towards a more user-centric approach. And I know that there will be in the near future, by the end of this year, open invitation to tender to provide and to provide scenarios of use of the platform towards more tailored applications. So I really invite also people to look at the European Space Agency calls in the near future, so that also maybe we can try to reshape or support in a better way the development of these IT services. But thank you again to all, and your inputs were really valuable for the entire EAG group, and then we will carefully consider all your input. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think that's it. Thanks also to the team from the GEO Secretariat for this support. I would like to mention again, the poll is now as a MS form available. The link is in the chat. We will close it by 8 o'clock, so everyone has enough time to fill it in. And yes, thank you also for your participation. And again, we will share what was discussed today with the EAG, and we look forward to more interaction with the GEO community from both sides, users and providers as well. And yeah, I wish you all a good rest of the day, afternoon, or a good night. Thank you very much.